Welcome to the last budget hearing for the fiscal year 2016. This is just the Board of Finance tonight. It is a public executive session, which means there'll be no comments from the public. It's just the board speaking. So before we get started, we'll take the Pledge of Allegiance. I see one of our registrar of voters, Mr. O'Torre, is here tonight. Mr. O'Torre, lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So the format for tonight's meeting, this meeting came about 7 or 8 years ago. We added this to the agenda, and really what it was just the follow-up night. It was the opportunity, particularly in difficult budget cycles, for the board to just discuss amongst itself any thoughts, comments, overall views on the budget. Now, it's not required, and this is not like the RTM or even, I think, the Board of Education, where they actually have a meeting or whatever and tip their hand. I think they do that on the RTM. They basically say what our adjustments are going to be, and then they come back another night and then vote on them and things like that. We're not as formal on this. Again, it's an open forum. We can go anywhere we want in the book, make any questions, comments, concerns we have, and we can make this as long as we want or as short as we want, depending on what everybody has. All right. Everyone understand? We're all set to go. Mr. Mayor, we all set? Mrs. Gardner, we're all set? All right. Let's open the floor. Go right ahead. Any questions from board members? Okay. I'll open up with one. Mr. Mayor, do we have any open items that have not been forwarded to the board per their request?
Yes, you do. You have the two.
Microphone, please.
Sorry. Two. Whoa.
Speak a little softer.
The history of grants. There's only one grant for the library. It's a $5,000 grant. But one of the items you asked for was the history of grant requests.
Okay.
They've said they'd get that to us tomorrow. Grant applications, I guess might be a better term. And the second item that's still outstanding is the valuation of the fire department's payroll accounts.
The valuation of
Or the evaluation of the, you wanted to like.
Yes, the
like
follow-up on where we stand this
Where we
year.
stand this year compared to what?
And when can you get that to us?
Actually, I was on the phone with them today, and it's probably in my office now.
Okay, so we'll get both
Yeah,
those
you get-
follow-up items tomorrow.
You definitely get the fire and hopefully the library as well, yes.
Thank you, sir. Other comments? Does anybody have any questions on any of the follow-up items that we've received over the course of the budget cycle? Mr. Brown?
Could we just go to page 307, please, and take one last look at debt service? And, Mr. Mayor, I believe you sent over the answer to what we discussed in the board meeting a couple weeks ago over the principal paydowns on bond anticipation notes being $3 million less than previous years. But could we just review that?
The way the bonds have been structured for as far back as I can find, the bonds are structured with a 5-year payback period. 0% the first 2 years, 5% the third and fourth year, and 90% the fifth year. So if you borrow a decent sum of money, I don't know if that's the right word, but amount of money every year, then every year you're going to have something that's going to be at that 90% level. Well, the 5-year-ago timeline, the total borrowing was, for the band, was like, I don't know, $1 million or something. So or not even, some small number, so that the principal pay down for next fiscal year is 90% of a very small number. And that's
Around $1 million, you're saying? 5%?
I want to remember 800,000, but I don't.
885,000.
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay.
Other questions? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, only because I missed some of the preliminary meetings, which was my apologies.
We missed you, Chris.
I thank you. I appreciate it.
love your smile.
I do. I feel the love, believe me. I just wanted to have a quick rundown of what all the positions that were requested, additional headcounts. I have finance obviously asked for headcount, conservation, and health department for nurses. Were there any other departments that asked for?
IT, you're talking about the department head requests versus the first selectman
Any requests
request.
for, yes, the department head request. IT
Yeah,
did ask for?
IT as well.
Okay. So finance, conservation, nurse, and health, I should say, and
Yes,
IT.
and IT.
All right. Yes, they definitely tuned these mics up tonight. Must have been from the comments from the other night. Oh, that's it for me. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Mottola?
So just, if you know this, for next year, not the fiscal year we're talking about now for next year's budget, but the following year, do you know what the debt service payment will be for that year yet, approximately?
The answer is yes, they have the waterfall model based
Yeah,
on best
and-
available information, but you don't have it with you, do
You
you?
can get
No.
it to me if you want to.
No.
I'm just curious.
It goes back up by a couple $1 million, doesn't it, as I recall?
Want to give it to him now?
Yeah, hold on a second.
Yeah, we have it.
That number got affected today. We did the refi today, and there will be, I think, about a $600,000 savings for fiscal year 17 out of the refi. So the number that's on the waterfall,
Now, let me
which
make it bigger.
is,
Let me make it bigger because it's microscopic here. And let me go over here. Okay, so this is for 17 he wants, which is above this number here, 26,156.
so 17 shows an increase of $1.5 million, so that increase would now be about 9. It could possibly be impacted when we do our offering in July of 14, if there's some bond premium.
So around 900 or so, give or take?
Yeah,
Okay.
as of right now.
Yeah, I understand, thank you. And one other question, can you tell me for this current year, what was the contingency account for the beginning of this current fiscal year, if you know, and have we tapped into that already?
The contingency account consists of two major components.
I know that, I'm just-
Contractual items and normal contingency. The normal contingency will be used up this year.
Okay.
The consent agenda.
And that's something, Mr. Flynn, that at some point we'll make some adjustments when,
Correct,
to us? Okay, all right, for like the snow removal, for example?
correct. We will shore everything up. Typically, we do that in the September timeframe, as I recall.
Gotcha, okay. That's all I had, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? Mr. Mayor had, I'm sorry, Mr. Becker, go right ahead.
Thank you. We had put off the discussion regarding the town clerk salary, and I think what we wanted to do with the first selectman and what the role was, and I think we had put that off. I think there was a legal opinion that was going to be circulated, which I actually don't know if,
I was not here
I don't
that
think I
night.
saw that,
Mr.
but-
Brown, were you here? You?
Yeah,
I don't know if we're going to talk about tonight or just put it on the voting night, but I just bring that up.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Walsh mentioned a 2011 Saxel email, not email, but legal opinion, which he was going to forward and did not. Mr. Bateson forwarded it 2 days ago, and that's been read by myself, by Mike, by town attorney, and it's, I mean, I don't want to be speaking like an attorney here, but the letter the letter addresses state statute. State statute says that, the letter addresses lots of things. It addresses, one, the ability of the Board of Finance to replace the first selectman in 401 plan versus pension plan. It addresses, and basically says that they can't because of the, the provisions of the retirement plan. And it addresses the RTM being able to increase the first selectman's any first selectman's 4-year term, this is per state statute, not town charter, 4-year term, 2 years into the term, that otherwise the
In other words,
selectmen's-
adjust their salary.
Right, the salary-only portion. But it does not address the charter, and in the charter, and this was a surprise to many of us, when we started looking, trying to answer Mr. Walsh's question. The charter basically says that the Board of Selectmen set the town officers' salaries. The charter also says the Board of Finance sets the town clerk's salaries,
And not the first selectman?
and not the first selectman.
But state statute says the RTM sets whose?
It says the RTM, the legislative body, can, in the middle of a 4-year term, increase the salary.
Okay, so here comes the question.
And it also says that the salary that the Board of Selectmen set has to be set prior to in the year prior to the election, the budget year prior to the election,
So this year.
this year.
And so we have to vote on, I guess the question is, are we setting the town clerk's salary and the Board of Selectmen's salary in this budget cycle?
The town will be setting the town clerk's salary and the Board of Selectmen's salary in this cycle. The Board of Finance will be fixing that of the town clerk, and the Board of Selectmen will be fixing that of the selectman and the second selectman.
So they would vote on their own salaries?
That's what the charter, that's how the charter reads.
Can we check what, does state statute talk about that at all?
No, the state statute does not, and I believe that, that Stanton's writing up his...
Precedent here has always been that we do both the town clerk and then we do the
Yes,
entire Board of Selectmen.
that's why we were taken,
Can we get an
by
answer?
surprise.
Can we get a specific answer on that from the town attorney,
Yeah.
the present town attorney, before we vote next week?
most definitely.
Okay. Mr. Becker?
And thinking back, and I was on the RTM at the time, but in the last cycle, I feel like when this started to come up, the Board of Selectmen, I think the issue started, and it may have been starting to notice that it might be under them, but that they, at the time, didn't really want any part of it because of the fact that it's kind of a little bit awkward heading into
No, it's a
an
conflict
election
of
cycle.
interest.
Exactly. So I think it sort of just reverted back at that time to Board of Finance do it, that's been the process, it sets in the budget, and everyone's stuck to it.
The issue is if the RTM wants to adjust it again, can they perhaps raise it? Probably, I mean, that's an issue that's got to be addressed as well.
The RTM can, the only mention of the RTM is in the state statute, which basically stipulates that
It's the middle of the election.
the middle of the election cycle, the RTM has the authority to increase the first time.
So they can't do it this, hang on, they can't do it this year, but
They
they can
cannot
do
do
it
it this
2
year.
years.
Right.
Is what, can we get that covered by this legal opinion as well,
Yeah.
to make sure that that's correct?
And if they raise it, what the obligation of the boards is then, I guess, are they obligated at that point to fund it, even if they raise it post the budget cycle or something to that effect, do we just have to pay it?
Yeah. Mrs. Leclerc?
Yeah,
That also goes back to my previous request for a legal opinion in that can the RTM raise the budget after we approve it?
no, I don't, no, I
I
don't
don't think
think,
they could.
no, I don't remember that was officially asked, but I think that's a definite no. The other thing that the Saxo letter does say is that there's nothing that prevents the Board of Finance from making recommendations.
Yeah. No, that's not for this. Okay, can we get a specific legal opinion? I know we have the legal opinion from a few years ago, but A, I don't think it covers everything, and B, I'm the one who actually had requested that legal opinion, and it was more about the definition of compensation at the time, because it was, does compensation just cover salary, or does it cover salary plus retirement plus health benefits and everything, was the crux of that. So if we could get that for next week to make sure we...
Right, yeah, we have the Sachs letter, and we'll get Stanton to write something, and we'll furnish both to the entire board.
Thank you. And I would assume that you're going to want that before the Board of Selectmen meeting, too, because you guys might have something to do, guys and lady, might have something to do related to that, or at least you're going to want to know. Okay. This has to do with salaries and your request of last week. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Becker. I don't know. Yeah, you don't have it here, right? From Mr. Saxel on the compensation. I think we're fine then. We're going to get another one anyway.
Yeah, I mean, leaving the letter by itself is incomplete anyway.
Yeah. One of the things during this budget cycle, and I'd ask Mr. Mayor to just kind of walk us through this briefly, one of the things I asked him to do on the side was, when we're looking at the budget, we're saying, hey, you know, it's going up by 1.6%, that's great. But the reality is, it's going up by 1.6% because there's several offsets. There's several good guys this year, whether it be pension, whether it be debt, and all that, that are really kind of, I don't want to say one-time items, but they're extraordinary items in that they're lowering the increase this year as an offset, right? So stripping those out, what I wanted to know is if you stripped out the kind of the extraordinary items that were going in our favor, what's the operating budget increase accepting those items? And Mr. Mayor, you came back to me with a couple numbers on that. Do you recall the conversation?
Most definitely, sir. And my recollection is plugging in the Board of Ed at 3%, plugging in salaries, and I think the salaries were 2.3%. I don't know how or why I picked that number. The result was either 3.06 or 3.16. And Linda is looking for that right now, but it was...
Is that for next year?
So it was for fiscal year 17.
Right. You also did it for 16, and what I recall you saying is...
Oh, what would it be if...
We had these extraordinary...
Maybe that's, maybe one is 3.06 and the other is 3.16.
Yeah, so I actually thought we were saying that 3.16 or whatever was, you know, a rough estimate of 2017, if you didn't have these one-time charges. And I actually thought it was a hair below 3% if it was 2016, stripping out some of the...
Yes, yes, you're actually correct. 3.06 is what it would be in 17, and you stripped them out this year, it'd be, I think it was 2.87.
Correct. So, in reality, the increase this year on just the operating expense side is 2.87, right? Back out some of these extraordinary savings that we have that we won't get necessarily next year, right? So this year, the real growth is about 2.8, and next year, the real growth, on an estimated basis, we wouldn't hold anybody to this, is a little over 3%. Okay, I just wanted to provide that context. That's why I asked that question. Ms. Cook-Littman.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm curious what items you actually stripped out to get those numbers specifically.
So there would definitely be the bond premium, or not the bond premium, rather, but the fact that we've got an extraordinarily low bond payment this year. Correct?
Yeah, we stripped out the change in pension and the change in
Bond.
in debt service. So that 3.06 would be lower now as a result of today's refi impact
Right.
on 17.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
So the only thing, I'm sorry, just to
no
clarify, the only thing you took out was the bond premium, nothing else?
And the pension, and the reduction in pension year over year. So
Okay.
we're getting a reduction in pension year over year. That lowers the net effect of the increase this year, and the reduction in bond, that lowers the net effect. Now, you'll recall, the valuation of the pension would say that we're going to be largely the same next year if all things created equal on the pension side. But the bond we just established, we already know is going to go up between 800,000 and 900,000 pending some other items. So that's an offset this year that won't have available to us next year. Okay, Mr. Matola.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, can you, and it goes to what Mr. Flynn's talking about for next year. The one big ticket item that we have to pay for fiscal year 16 is the $400,000 for the reval, right? So that won't be in fiscal 17, correct? Follow what I'm saying?
Correct. Half of it was this year, half of it next
Yeah.
year.
Half of it next year, or half of it last year? I mean,
Yeah.
this year,
15?
yeah,
16 is it.
first, right.
And is there anything else, and I went back to try to read my notes, which were, I couldn't read them unfortunately, but is there any other big ticket item like that that's in the fiscal year 16 budget that we won't have in 17?
Not at this time.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Mrs. Leclerc? And then I will go to
Just-
Mr. Walsh.
For Mr. Matola, about the reval won't be there, but historically, legal fees go back up the next year because of that.
Excellent point. Thank you.
So it isn't quite,
We don't, in other words, we don't pocket the difference.
right.
Yeah. Mr. Walsh, you had your hand up?
Yes. Bob, I don't know whether you saw this, but the Fairfield Taxpayer Group has recently sent out an email on March 25th, 2015 at 9:12 PM. And in it, on the third page of it, I'm going to read you a quote from them, and I just need you to either verify it or refute it either here or at a later point. They state that, in contrast, spending on the town side is projected to rise less than 1%, 0.8% to be exact. However, excluding the benefits of a $2.6 million decline in retiree benefit cost, parentheses, down 15.7%, end parentheses, and a $2.2 million decline in debt service costs, parentheses, down 4.2%, end parentheses, spending on the town side services is projected to rise 5.4%, even more than the 3.3% for the BOE, and substantially more than what has been the 1.9% increase on average over the last 6 years.
Yeah, what he's done there is two things. One, the debt service number is actually $1,096,000 less, not $2.2 million. Secondly, he has taken the town budget and stripped out pension, debt, OPEB, I think those three items. And then he's taken the remainder. And then he's taken the change in budget, X those items, X the change of those items, and X the absolute value of those items, and calculated his 5.4%. I have not recalculated it with the correction in the debt service.
So he's wrong on the debt service number.
Correct.
So other than the debt service number, you don't have a problem with his calculations?
Correct.
Okay, so could you do the calculation and get back to us by an email?
Sure.
Can't do it here.
Of course.
If you can do it here tonight, we'll take the number tonight.
Yeah, well, I'd want to look at the whole thing. I haven't had a chance to do that.
Okay. Do you have a copy of this, or do you want a copy of it?
Yeah, no, I have it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're coming to the same area, right around the set. We're coming at it two different ways, but we're coming to the same conclusion on some of the other spending
Yeah.
items. Yeah. Mr. Becker?
If you want one further, if I may, one further comment. If you were to include the entire town budget, X the savings in those three items, then the budget increase would be 3.3.
Thank you. Mr. Becker?
I would presume that the 2.6 number is the difference in the band, in that the debt service, had the band been in there this year, the entire debt service would have moved up 2.6, because it's normally, last year was around 2.9, this year it's at
Let's let-
0.3, so.
You could very well be right.
It's-
Let's let Mr. Mayor recalculate and answer the question.
Yeah.
You might be right.
No, it's-
Okay. Mr. Walsh, Is that it for now? That's it. Any other questions, comments from board members on this? Yeah, Mr. Stone.
These things that have helped us, what we're talking about, have also allowed us to fund a lot of things that we haven't been able to do.
Correct.
So, in other words, we're funding paving, which we cut back, and things like that. So, these things might be a one-time thing, but because of that, we're able to do things that we would have to do the following year, maybe.
Correct.
So it does help us. And, budgets are great, and you can project and project and project all you want. We don't know what's going to happen the following year, and a lot of things. The one thing that I'm a little bit leery about is the conveyance tax. We're projecting $1.5 million. And what was the highest we ever had? Wasn't it like 2.5 revenue?
I know that this year is coming in very, very strong.
Yeah,
I know that Betsy
I thought it was
felt
over.
really strong about that
Definitely was
number.
over 2. I don't know how,
Yeah.
to me, that the conveyance fact, the revenue thing is low. I mean, I can live with it, but but we don't know what it's going to happen. But I think it's low from what I can see in the real estate market and the stuff that's selling.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Any other questions, comments? Give everybody just a couple minutes. Anybody have anything else to say? Mr. Becker?
Thank you. Maybe as a follow-up item, could we get those numbers on the conveyance side, maybe just a little bit more of the historical, and see? Because, you raise a point. Some of the numbers have been coming in very strong, and obviously you want to be careful, and obviously it's probably a cautious number.
We'll go back a little bit.
But that'd be helpful.
Thank you.
It's really
We'll go back,
rallying there.
Mr. Mayor, possible to go back 10 years in there?
How many years?
10?
10, we'll try.
Because I think we want to go back, the only reason I picked that is we want to go back before the great cliff.
Makes sense?
Mr. Brown? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just going back to Mr. Flynn's question about what you took out to get the increase. You said you took out, on the operating side, pension and debt service. Did you take out OPEB too? Because that's a negative from last year too, of $400,000.
I don't know.
Would you, is
I
that
mean,
something you
it's,
would take out?
the OPEB, the decrease in OPEB is $411,000 this year.
So it's insignificant.
So it's not like $2 million or like
So you just took
some
out
of the
those
others.
two big numbers?
Yeah, do you remember, Linda, if we took out OPEB?
Those are the numbers, by the way, Mr. Mayor, that you told me you took out.
OPEB as well?
No, you did not list OPEB.
No, when we did the 3.06.
I mean, you might as well include it to keep it accurate, right?
That's fair enough.
Give me 1 second.
We have this year's without the OPEB?
And he might have, he just didn't tell me.
We did it both ways. We did this.
Any other, are you guys looking that up?
Yes, because we,
This is the 17, this is the 3.06.
this is without
Anybody else have anything?
the one you did today.
I have a couple of things.
Yes. Well, you guys are doing that, are they questions or comments, Mr. Walsh? Only because I want to
Couple of questions, couple of comments.
All right, why don't you make your comments, and then we'll go back to the...
Well, they depend
Oh, all
on the
right.
answers
You
to the
gotta do that.
questions.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just trying to let them do. Are you guys set? Yeah,
No, we're getting there. Here.
they've got their MTV.
This one is just,
That just dated me. Mr. Mayor, are we good?
No, we're just looking for stuff while we're,
Can Mr. Walsh, let's let Mr. Walsh talk with you, and maybe Mrs. Sconner can look for it.
I'm sorry, what?
Mr. Walsh, go right ahead, ask your questions.
I have a question. Bob, has your department done any calculation whatsoever in regards to what the total cost of the current teacher contract is going to cost the town of Fairfield, all in? Because I watched Mr. Dwyer at the RTM meeting give Mr. Lipp an answer saying that it was going to have a 1.7% impact on the budget. Clearly, that number's incorrect, correct?
Correct.
Have you done a calculation, or is anybody in your department or on the town side, whether it be Mr. Tetro, you, or anyone on the town side, for our budgeting purposes, of what this contract's going to cost us for the next 3 years?
My recollection of my calculation was an average of 3.38 per year.
3.8?
3.38.
3.38 per year. Okay.
Yeah, the salary increases was 3%, or actually 2.97% or something like that, when they did the scaling, and then the insurance goes up only $2 million. It would go up much more if it wasn't for the change in the healthcare plan. So when you factor in the 3% from the salaries, and then the additional $2 million on the insurance.
Don't, stay with the line of thought.
Sorry, wait.
You get a total of 9.
Is that relevant to
Yeah,
this
it's-
question, or is that the?
Yeah, no, she was showing me something. Yeah, but no, it's 3.3, I think, something like that.
You said 3.3?
3.8 is what I said.
Mr. Dwyer, you're here. Would you care to comment, just because I know you're here, and feel free?
I didn't come dressed to be
Yeah.
on TV.
That's all.
The answer at the RTM was that we were only looking at the impact of this teacher's contract on the budget, not the other 6 contracts, not the staffing changes required by extra paras because of special ed, not the staffing changes because of the changes in world language curriculum that we were doing. So we were answering only for the impact of the teacher's contract. So yes, there's a difference between that number and the total budget, because there are other factors that impact the budget. The first year, Mr. Lipp asked me what was the impact on, that we can expect in May. So when we were looking at the cost of both salary and health benefits in that first year, the net of them cost to the budget for salary plus health benefits for teachers this current year, and the salary and benefits for the teacher's contract next year, as negotiated, it came out to 1.66, 1.7. That does not take into account the factors that I mentioned to you about hiring new staff because of paras, staff because of change of class demographics. You know, you lose some sections in elementary, but you have to add some sections in high school because of the growth there. So net, there's about an extra 1.5 certified staff that are needed because of those changes. So the 1.7 is an accurate number, but it was answered only in relationship to the FEA contract for next year.
Okay. I watched it on Fair TV, so it was a bit confusing.
It's a complicated
And
contract, absolutely.
followed by your continued conversation where you're saying that you knew the RTM wanted to bring a full tax increase in of 2%. You start saying that I can't control electricity, which you can. But you understand they wanted to bring a, based on their past experience, wanted to bring a total tax increase or an increase of 2%. And that this was going to be an effect of 1.7, it was 80% of the total cost of the Board of Education. And it's confusing. When you see it, I could see how, you know, when I looked at it, it seemed to suggest that it was going to cost 1.7, and now it seems to be 3.38.
No, that's not an accurate number.
It's definitely not an accurate number.
Because
I've heard
the
Mr. Mayor say
salary
it's not
and
an
the
accurate
health,
number.
you do the math on salary and health for next year only, it's 1.7. In the outer years, 2 and 3, yes, it goes up at a higher rate.
Okay. Thank you.
The actual numbers. Linda's pretty. Did I get shut off? No, I'm on. Linda, we have 300-plus documents here, so it takes a while. The salary impact for fiscal year 16 is a plus 2.272 million, 3%. The healthcare impact, the
Wait,
first.
say it again. Salary impact is what?
2.272555.
Okay.
3% over the fiscal year 15. The healthcare impact mitigated, remember, we probably have the 8% trend offset by the reduction in the plan design. So healthcare went up 2.17%, $293,079. The total for the combination of the two is a combined annual change of 2,565,634 for a percent change of 288. Now, if you take that budget, like, so the total of this is like 91 million, okay, and I don't know what the total school board budget is, but if the school board budget was 180 million, just double that, then
This
that
year
would
is
be
155.
155. So if you divide 9173 by 165,
Hey, Mr. Mayor, let's do it this way. The 91 million in that is benefits, it's also, I think, the other, let's just look to
yeah,
the,
so one point, if you take this year increase, the
Let's just
2.5 million
look at the salaries.
divided by 151,
1.4.
that would be 1 point something.
it's 1.4.
So can I only
1.4
make one suggestion, is that I think Mr. Mayor is talking about the total salary budget and
No.
total health budget, because the 90 million, the certified staff is only 75 million.
Mr. Dwyer, let me do it this
So,
way, just so that I
Just to
can
make
show
sure
you.
the numbers are being correct.
Let me do it this way. Teaching staff, I'm just going to take teaching staff, was $69 million over 156. Those are round numbers for this past year. That's 44%.
Over 150.
It's a little over $2 million increase on the 69 million. 2 million over 156 comes to about a 1.3% increase year over year, just on teacher salaries. So a 3% teacher salary increase in that budget equates to a 1.3% increase annually in the global Board of Education.
And
Then the number actually combined, I mean, just to clarify, the numbers that we're talking about, the salaries for 16, or for 15, 75 million, as Chairman Dwyer just stated. The healthcare for 15 is $13,480,000.
Right.
For a total of 89,000. The total budget, as he just stated, is about 151. If you take the total change of these two components divided by the 151, you get the 1.7% increase impact on the total budget.
Well, and that's, the 151 is actually, you're talking about the 2013, 2014. The 2014, 2015 was 155.
Okay, then we should divide.
156. And just the teacher's salaries was 69,000, it was 68,900.
Yeah, and
If you
Mr.
include
Flynn,
the
if I could,
certified, it's 75. Yeah.
the certified is 75, correct. Sometimes people confuse the term certified and teachers, because certified staff include more than teachers. Most of them are teachers, but some of them are guidance counselors and whatnot. So if you're only trying to add the teaching line, you'll get a lower number than
69.
than that. So, Mr. Flynn, thank you for correcting the certified number, which is 75 million, a rounded number.
If I understood what you just said, Tom, for the teachers, it's about a 1.3% over a 3-year period.
No.
No.
It's
1 year.
it's 1 year.
1 year.
And for the teachers,
Right.
is an aggregate of a 3% increase per year per them, which, to Mr. Mayor's point, comes out to 3.3,
When you add in the healthcare,
correct.
When you add in all the benefits you're talking about.
Well,
not
even-
all the health, well, I don't know if they get health pension benefits, actually.
The bottom line is, when you just strip all that stuff out, if the question asked was, what's the impact of just the teacher's contract on the budget,
Right.
right? It's anywhere, depending on apples to oranges, 1.3 to 1.7
Okay.
in the year,
Yeah.
for the 1 year.
For the 1 year.
For the 1 year. And that's basically saying that's the 69 million, right? Or 69 and change, right? Multiplied by 3% over the 156 says, what's the impact? It's a $2 million impact. 2 million on 156 comes to 1.3. Now, you can argue it, right, and it comes to like 1.7 or so.
One set of teachers,
thanks.
75 are the certified teachers. He just
What's in or what's out?
They're breaking it.
Yeah, that 69 would be using teachers only.
Correct.
75 the people that are covered by the contract.
It's all this, that was my next question, because Mr. Dwyer was very clear that it was just teachers. The 75 is teachers
No,
and certified.
it's
So is it all
certified.
certified? So it's all certified?
All certified.
So then it's the 75, and then you're
Correct.
back up to your 1.7.
To 1.65,
But that
right.
is only the salary portion, that is not the benefit portion that I'm calculating there.
No, that includes the
Salary
benefit.
and
The
health.
1.65
Okay, because
includes both.
go to page 37.
In the, let me go.
Page 37.
Where is it?
In the Board of Ed budget book.
No, I don't have mine with me, so this isn't going to be a quiz, is it?
No. Feel free. I'm not going to, I'm just going to say, look at the top of the page, right? Top of the page says staff salaries, $101 million, right? You look in the thing, it says salaries, teaching staff, 68,921, certified staff, 6.3 million. Add them together, that's 75 million. Where am I wrong when it says that that's salaries?
No, this, on page 37, that's talking about salaries.
Right, so that's 75 million in just salaries without the benefits.
Correct. And back to the original math, without using exact numbers, the salaries plus the cost of health benefits for the certified staff is A. The cost of salaries and health benefits next year is B. The difference between those two for 1 year is the 1.7. And
I don't know.
Ron, I can send you the math that I sent to Mr. McKenzie that seemed to answer his question, because actually, Mr. McKenzie, who originally asked the question, sent us an email saying, here's my math, which showed 1.7 for next year, and I said, correct.
How do you, what am I missing between Mr. Mayor telling me it's 3.3, the total cost of the contracts for the teachers, and you're 1.7?
I'd have to ask Mr. Mayor to show me
Because
exactly
the-
what the
No,
numbers are.
it's two different numbers.
Two different
Two
sets of
totally
numbers.
different numbers.
Yeah.
The first year, the 3.3, number one, is the three-year average, okay? That's the first-year impact on the contract itself, assuming no turnover, no savings, and because of churn and people leaving, et cetera, et cetera. If everybody stayed, if everybody got the 3%, and combined with the change in healthcare, given trend at 8%, and given the savings in the plan design change of, I think, about 5.5%, right, Phil?
Yes.
We end up with about a 2.88 the first year, and then 3.53 the second year. Now, the 1.7 million, now that number is the impact on that
1.7%.
group, that bucket, okay? The 1.69% number is the impact of that change on the entire budget.
Correct.
Okay. So we seem to, that, it seems to be a game in a way, because the real number is your first number that I asked you about. That's really.
I answered your question,
Number.
yes.
Well, there's a couple moving parts. The impact of the certified staff's, okay, this is the way I would say it. The impact of the certified staff's salary increases on the annual budget for this year is about 1.7%.
Yeah.
Okay, on the overall budget. The line item itself is going up over 3% because of the budget. So the line item's going up, it's simple, I mean, you're giving them a 3% raise, it's going up 3%. Compounded annually for the next couple of years, you're going up to 3.3%. So if the question's asked, hey, what's the impact on the overall budget? It's 1.7%. If it's, what's the impact on that on that line item? It's over 3%. But I do have one problem here that doesn't make sense to me right now. Because if I take, let's go back to my comments a couple of seconds ago, staff salaries. If you add the staff salaries, and I'm saying they're just salaries, to get the certified staff salaries, that's $75 million. You do the math over the 156 budget, and it comes out to the 1.7. That does not include the impact of the benefits if these line items are to be believed and they don't have the benefits in them. The impact to the benefits would be incrementally positive or negative, but would adjust that $1.7 million number, or 1.7% number.
And
I didn't follow all the numbers, because I was looking at some other stuff here.
Okay.
And,
So the 75 million, if we take on page 37 and say that the 75 million is just the salaries
Right.
for the teachers and the certified staff, so the total of those two numbers is 75 million.
This number.
yes,
If they go up
They're
by
close.
3%, okay, and then you divide it into the 156 total for the budget, you're going to come to that 1.7% that you've been talking about, that the impact is, right, of the change in the salaries. But that's only the change in the salaries. That doesn't include the change in the benefits. The benefits had a change independent of that, correct?
I think that when we divided to get the 169, we took the 75 times 3 times decimal 03, divided that by the 1, so I'm going to do that. 75 times decimal 03 equals $2,250,000, divided by, how much we want to use?
56.
156 equals 1.44.
Okay.
Then you add the 2 million, excuse me.
From the medical.
From the medical, you get
That's
to the
what I wanted to get.
1.69.
Perfect. Okay, I got it. Thank you. So that's where you're getting the 1.7. And you're using the total medical, which is from the other schedule for the internal service fund of what it's going up year over year.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the answer of the impact of this contract in the first year on the entirety of the Board of Ed budget is approximately 1.7 on the total budget.
Correct.
The impact on those individual line items on the
It's
salary line.
2.88 for this year for salary and health. 3 on salary, 2.17 on health.
Correct. Thank you.
Would we be able to get that spreadsheet that you're looking at on your computer? How you guys do the calculation?
Sure.
and would you like to have the calculations that we did?
Yeah, I'd like it to have both, that'd be
Thank
great.
you.
What do I call this?
And in that regard, it might make sense to, and this is just a suggestion, and maybe it's something this board wants to take up, because as we all know, this board has no control over these contracts. However, we have to find a way to finance them after they're signed and ratified by, after the Board of Education negotiates them and the RTM ratifies them, is to come up with some type of worksheet, spreadsheet that details exactly the effects so that everyone's on the same page for every contract. And we have a lot of contracts coming up. The Board of Education contract was the largest. It affects the budget the most for the longest period of time. And it just seems as though these numbers are so large, just so that all boards are on the same page, that we get some type of uniform system, that we all know what we're looking at, so that when we see it, clearly our board, we'd get it after it was done. But at least we'd know what we were to expect in the coming years.
Sure.
And the last point I thought about was whether we should have an outside financial analyst look at this stuff, so we know it's just somebody who does them all.
Don't you guys engage in that with your negotiators? When you're using the outside attorney, don't they work hand in hand with some financial analysts?
The principal consultant that we use is on health insurance because it is so complicated. This year, we actually hired, both the town and the Board of Ed use Aon. This year, the Board of Ed hired a independent health insurance consultant to watch over and confirm what Aon was suggesting to us. Both came with the same recommendations. I mean, that they agreed on.
But it might help all
direction.
boards to have some type of uniform system, that when we sign it,
disagree.
we would know exactly what the costs were, salary, benefits,
and-
in a similar form for all contracts, every
But
single one.
let's caveat it, you're not going to know for benefits to a specific dollar amount. You'll know
No, it's
within a
just based on
range.
estimates, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're all
Should
based on
know for
estimates because we're
salaries.
self-insured.
Sure, exactly.
Both the town
It's
and the
an
board.
estimate, but the best estimate at the time.
We do, on the Board of Ed, have a consistent descriptive memo that's, depending on the contract, somewhere between 6 and 10 pages long that we provide to the RTM that outlines the 3-year cost of the contract. I don't know that you've ever seen one, but Mr. Becker has seen it because, of course, he was on the negotiating committee.
Is that something you could just forward to
And
us?
it's distributed to the RTM, so I could forward it to the chair.
That'd be great.
I have to get it from administration first and then
Fine.
have them forward.
If you could forward that to us, and let's take this up for after the budget process, when the budget committee meets. Let's see what they can come back with, maybe for Mr.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. One, the Board of Ed does put together a document. The document itself, though, didn't total up to a total. It had lots of information in it, but it didn't total up to a total. But with respect to your request, Mr. Walsh, you'll find that the town did not produce a 10-page document, but we did produce a 1-page document, which defined everything that you're asking for. The impact of OPEB, the impact of healthcare, the impact of the salaries by the 3 years,
And that
and
was
the
shared
total
back?
and the net.
And that was shared back?
Yes.
You guys are in agreement
So the Board of
on that.
Education got that, and then the RTM
Oh,
got
that
that
was my,
document.
well, my document went to the RTM, no, it didn't go to the Board of Ed, no. But it's, it's,
Well, I think that's the point, to have everybody
yeah,
be
just like this
consistent.
document we've been referring to here is a 1-page document,
Okay.
which you'll see the numbers.
Let's take a look at it, but
Yeah.
let's take a look at
The towns are a little bit
document.
more complex because they have the OPEB and the pension included.
Right. And then we'd like to see that after the fact. All right? Great. Any other
I'm relieved of
questions,
duty?
comments? No, thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Any other questions, comments? Concerns, Mr. Walsh?
My only concern, and I know I've expressed this to our board, I think the last time, actually, in the executive session, but just the theory itself is, clearly, one of the major cost savings or negative drivers in this budget, and I guess what the drivers are on page 35 of the regular budget. Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, out of these negative, what I would call negative drivers, that being workers' comp, OPEB, supplemental contribution or risk management, debt service, and pension. For example, debt service, it's a negative $1,096,
$1 million.
$96,159. Next year, we're going to have a number in there, correct? We know based on our debt schedule, because we knew coming in based on the waterfalls that we were
Right.
seeing that this was going to be a great year for debt service.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you'd been producing waterfall after waterfall, and we knew this was going to be a great year for that,
Right, and you all read every line and every number.
just like you do,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
Yeah, the number next year goes up 1.5 million. I'm not sure you were here yet. We finished the refi, we did accomplish the refi today. And the savings of, we saved about 1.4 million, 1.5 million, something like that. It didn't close out till late this afternoon. So I haven't had a chance to go back and look at the exact number. But of that savings, about 600,000 will be for fiscal year 17. So the $1.5 million increase that we're looking right now for fiscal year 17 would be reduced by that 600,000. So that would be 900,000. We will have a bond offering in July. If we were to get some premium, that could be used to offset 17 as well. It would be, if we got bond premium, 1/3 of it would be used to offset. Because we amortize that over 3 years at a maximum to avoid issues with the arbitrage loss.
Bond premium for the refinance that you just did?
No, there's no savings from a refi,
Yep.
because all the any bond, there was bond premium, but the proceeds from the bond all go into escrow
Okay.
to pay off the bonds that we called. So so we saved 1.5 in our debt service over the next X number of years. But the bond premium goes against that, goes into the escrow account that pays off the bond, so we don't have access to that.
Okay. So the number next year will be 900,000?
Unless we have bond premium with our bond sale in July. The
July,
increase would be
okay.
900,000, yes, sir.
Okay. So that'll be $900,000 of fresh money next year that we have to put back into the budget.
That would be a positive or negative driver, whatever way you want to look at it, yeah. That line item would be increased by 900,000.
Well, I think under Mike's, that would be a driver of why we had an increase. It would be 900,000 unless, like you said, in July, we have some type of bond premium that comes in.
Right. I'm not sure you arrived yet. We had, Mr. Flynn, Chairman Flynn had asked me a few weeks ago to put together some numbers. If using,
Taking out the one-time extraordinary items.
well, I'm talking for 17,
Right.
including the bond, including the debt service driver at the 1.5 million, the budget increase for fiscal year 17 would be 3.06%.
I was here for
Yeah,
that
okay, I'm sorry,
conversation.
yeah.
And based on the conversation we just had on the Board of Education, it's hard to believe that they're going to be coming in with a budget of less than 3%.
I used 3% in mine, but yes, I understand what you're saying, sir.
Because you said their average is 3.38%,
No,
which,
but that's only on the salary line item, that's not on the budget as a whole.
yes, but that makes up 80% of
Yeah,
what we're going to be.
it's their next year impact.
It still comes to about 2%, not 3%,
No, next year is 3.53, actually.
for Board of Ed,
For the Board of Ed, for that contract.
for the contract.
Right.
I'm talking for the
what would-
Board of Ed budget as a whole.
We put in 3% to get,
Correct.
not to get the 3.06, but we used 3% and we got 3.06.
Right.
I guess I'm getting at is that while this year we have some negative drivers that are assisting us, and I know Mr. Mayor's going to do some calculations about, I guess, what you think is 3%, and the taxpayer group is saying is 5 point whatever percent, but you'll. figure that out.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
What I said was, his calculation strips out the debt service and the pension from, like, let's say our budget, what's our budget, Linda?
He rips it out of both sides.
Right. So when you rip it out of both sides, our budget is 130. So you take out 27 in debt service, you take out 10 in OPEB, you take out 10 in pension, you come down to 80. And what he is saying, then he takes the total increase, X those savings, and divides that by the 80, and he gets his 5%. What I'm saying is, if you don't rip it out of both sides, if you just take out the savings, then it comes in at 3.3%. Again, different numbers.
But we're starting next year with already having to find, unless we have some type of significant premium coming in July, adding $900,000 to the budget.
Correct, in addition to salaries and wages and longevity and
And all
whatever
that.
else. Yes, sir.
That, and it was one of the reasons, which I can't talk about right now, because it was stuff that came up in the executive session, of trying to find a way to pay for something this year to smooth the tax increases for the taxpayer over the next several years, as opposed to being 1.6 something, and then popping it up to 3%. Because I don't think, in general, the taxpayers are going to want to see that. They're not going to want to see that. And what's going to happen then, come next year, is we could all feel good about this year. We could all feel great, and that's great, we brought in 1.6. But I'm not doing 3% next year. If I'm sitting in this seat, I'm not doing 3% next year. So there's going to be some pain next year. And I think that there should be some smoothing done. And I would hope that it would start at the Board of Selectmen table. and that we should try to manage this. And if not, I guess if the Board of Selectmen fails to do it, I'm going to try to do it. But if we don't, I'm just going on notice, I'm not doing 3% next year. It's not happening. So,
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Cook-Lippman.
Just along those lines, if we're trying to anticipate tax increases next year, so we want to increase things this year, it seems to me that that really could just get us into more trouble next year, because if we add certain things, and I don't know what you're thinking about, Mr. Walsh, but if we add certain things this year, some of them will have to carry to next year, and it might only add to the tax increase next year, and it seems that anticipating a higher tax increase next year, it behooves us to be responsible this year and not put certain things into the budget. So again, I don't know what you're thinking you could add, but anything we do this year impacts next year's budget as well.
well, you weren't here at the last meeting, and you weren't here at the executive session, but something was in that executive session that you should probably speak to maybe some of your Democratic members about, that there is some talk about doing some things that I would suggest we do now. Stuff we can't talk about here. We can go back and have an executive session if you want to talk about these same issues, but we should all get together and start thinking about doing now to try to smooth this out. Otherwise, it's going to affect next year, the following year.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Mrs. Cook-Lippman. Mr. Stone.
You know, I'm listening to this, and personally, I think we should worry about the following year when we get to it. I think this year, it's nice to take advantage of some of these perks that we're getting. I think the taxpayers deserve it. We've lowered the tax increases have been coming down. Because of this, this budget, we were able to, like I said, add paving. We were able to add someone in the finance department, maybe another nurse or whatever. And I think that while we should always keep in mind the future, now is not necessarily the time. I think the taxpayers would like to see a low budget. They've been clamoring for it for years. So I don't see the point in adding things to this when we've strived and worked so hard to pay our pension funds and pay everything off and get to a spot where we really have a strong, fiscally responsible budget. And we still have our AAA rating. And yes, we should always look to the future, but I don't think we have to address it in this particular budget. There might be some savings that we find next year. We don't know what's going to happen next year.
You can, Mr. Mottola.
And this, what Mary was saying a few minutes ago when I mentioned the $400,000 is, I forget, for the legal fees we're going to anticipate for the reval, it's in this budget, right?
Well, yes, the issue is
Carries over.
the legal activity is cyclical. So it's a 5-year, 4-year, 5-year. It's a 5-year. What's the number?
5 year.
5 year. So it's 5 year.
Correct.
So by the time you get to the end of the reval period, the number of people who are coming in appealing is way low, and then so the last year prior is the lowest year.
Yep.
Okay. In fact, the number that's in the budget right now for reval activity is 90,000. I think that's probably overstated, actually. There was some discussion about that. It's probably, 50 might be, but so you could reduce the budget, but we don't want to go there right now, I guess. But then when the reval comes out, then there's a lot of activity that first year. So that number will go up a couple of 100,000, from 50,000 or 60,000 to 200,000 or something.
I always mess this up, and Jim, you know it better than I do. We will, based on the nature of the reval, anticipate legal fees going up for FY16 or FY17?
FY17.
Okay,
And
I
18.
apologize then, okay, all right. Okay, so with that said, though, I still think one of the things that may help us next year is, we have a big nut, the $400,000 that, for the vision, that we have to pay, appraisal, that's in this budget, which we're not going to have that.
That's good, that's what Ms. Claire was saying.
So Claire said, though, for 17, we're going to probably have higher.
Right, well, we'll save the 420,000 or 60,000 was over there this year, and it'll be offset by a couple $100,000
Right, so
increase.
there are a couple $100,000.
So there's a couple hundred, yes, sir.
But, so that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you for clarifying that.
And I understand, okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Becker? Go ahead. And then we'll come back to you, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. And I think on my end, I usually start this process off that if there's something catastrophic, something major that comes out, during the process, then I might be willing to, approve something that is larger than what the first selectman's proposal is. But otherwise, I'm usually not comfortable with doing that. And I look at the budget number and the tax number, and the tax number obviously is what's the most direct impact. I think along the lines of some of this smoothing and the future, I'm not opposed to making some adjustments that might improve that, because there are definitely some items that stick out that are going to come out in the future. But if we're going to do something like that and we're going to add somewhere, then we probably, in my view, then we've got to start looking at some of these areas where we've taken some positions that we've added and some other items throughout the budget where we've said, well, we have an easy year so we can do these things. Well, maybe we can't do all of them if we're going to try and go down that route. And maybe there's a balance in there to get there. But that's kind of where I'm thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. We'll go to Mr. Walsh.
And address, Mr. Stone, just a couple of the things that you said. I understand, and there's nothing that I'd love to do, and I think the taxpayers do need a break, and I would love to be able to bring a tax increase in that was, near the consumer price index or, whatever. But sitting in this seat and having the knowledge that I do, I can't ignore the fact that, yeah, we're having a great year this year for certain negative drivers, and it's a great thing. But how do I not yo-yo the taxpayer? Because I know we're going to be here next year, and I know we're not going to be at 1.6. And while this might be a reprieve this year, this may be a nice feeling, I don't want the taxpayers to think that this is going to be the same thing next year, because we already know that without some of these things, the town will be at around 3%. The Board of Ed stuff is 3.3 as it is. We were going to be looking at, without some of these savers, which I think savers, I would love to have the same 4 or 5 things next year. I would love it. But right now, without some of these, we'd be at 3% all day this year. What I'm trying to do is to try to still bring in a reasonable tax increase for the taxpayer, but maybe just try to take some of these savings and try to pay for something this year that we don't have to pay for next year, to try to, so that we're not yo-yoing things around. It's just a concern of mine. I don't like when it yo-yos around. It's not fair to the taxpayer who's trying to plan their budgets consistently, especially our people who are on fixed incomes. I have a woman who lives across the street from you, I help with her bills and things like that. She's 95 years old. She's on a fixed income. Changes like this, even with senior tax relief, are tough. And it's just, I think for everyone in this community, if we have some reasonableness on where we're going to be going and some smoothing of this thing to some degree, it would be helpful.
Mr. Stone.
I understand what you're saying, but it's like, we're paying, the 95-year-old person is going to be paying more now, if you increase things that you might not be able to afford. And, I think she should take it year to year at 95 years old, but, but the other thing is, Mr. Becker.
Yeah,
Well, I'm just downer. I'll tell you who, you just said a neighbor. But Mr.
Wow, I hope she's asleep.
I forget there's TV. But what Mr. Becker said, makes sense. Maybe there, if you want to add something, maybe we could subtract something. We did add things, if there's something you wanted to cut.
Well, and Mr. Stone, that's one of the reasons I asked Mr. Mayor to do the exercise, and I thank him for doing it by pulling those out, is because we just have to realize that on the true operating expenses of the town, what the actual increase is this year, right? Because the actual increase this year on those items is not 1.6%. It is higher than that. Now, some of that, you can argue, was legitimate, because we put off doing some things because of tax increases, and now we're going back and saying we really should do this, and we're taking advantage of the opportunity to do it. But we should go into our discussions next week eyes wide open that, many of these departments, and the thing that's a problematic when we look at our budget books, and it's nobody's fault, this isn't a criticism, this is the way it is you'll look at it and say, hey, our budget only went up by 0.5% this year. Well, guess what? That's because you haven't baked in the salary increases, because we've been so many years without the contracts in that specific department being done, that's not baked in. So it gives you a false sense of security that, hey, we're managing that specific department so tightly that it's only a 0.5% increase. And again, that's not a criticism, that's the mechanics of the budget process. So I think we just want to go into it, and I think you and Mr. Becker raised an excellent point. If you're going to add something, maybe you want to cut something. Mr. Walsh, I'm not as concerned with the smoothing. However, if there is an opportunity to save funds by taking the advantage of paying something off early and not paying interest on that or something like that, it's certainly in a year like this, that's worth looking at, because overall that saves money. Whereas if it's just paying something early for the perception of having smooth 2% per year versus 1.6 and 2.7 one year, I'm not necessarily for that. But if for true dollar value, we can actually save money by paying something off and save the taxpayer money year over year, then that might be something worth looking at. That's the way I'd approach it. It doesn't bother me as much, and that's just I'd rather the taxpayer have the money than me take their money now. Whether they're 95, 85, or 46.
Yeah, I just don't think that tax increases should yo-yo around. It'd be 1.6 and then 3.2. That they go up 100, tax increases go up 100% from year to year.
Perfectly valid.
I mean, seriously. I mean, that is a problem, and that is something that I think that this board should look at. In that, with the knowledge that we have,
Perfectly valid.
with the future that we know that's coming, there should be some type of smoothing that is done with this, as opposed to yo-yoing these things around by 100%.
Yeah, this is good. This is like a tennis match.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But we're not talking about, even next year, probably a huge tax increase. It's a couple percentage points.
Do you think there's going to be a 3% tax increase next year?
I have no
Do
idea.
you think it's reasonable, based on the fact that he's telling you that the Board of Ed's at least 80% of their salary, 80% of their budget's at 3-point-something percent?
It's very possible,
Okay,
but we don't know what we're going to be cutting next year, things like that. So we still have time.
okay. I'm just trying to look at reasonable numbers of what we see coming down the pike, and it's looking to me that we're seeing 3% all day long, and I
don't disagree.
I don't
and
necessarily
you and I will
disagree
sit
either.
here, and we can make a little
No, I'm not disagreeing
wager on the
with you.
side about it, but,
Yeah.
I think we're going to be sitting here next year with a reasonable 3% number before us.
Right, but it's not 7 or 8%.
Unless we have, and I pray that there's some other savings that come in next year, another $4 million of some positive numbers, and we don't know. But you know what? We could also have negative numbers come in, and we be at 4 or 5%.
Yep, we've seen that happen. Mr. Mottola?
With that said, you guys in the Board of Selectmen made some tough decisions a few years ago when things weren't going that well, and the town, we had to suck it up, for lack of a better term. So, and I think, Jim, you just said, we don't know next year. So I understand what you're saying and appreciate it. But I'm kind of like Mr. Flynn.
I'm sorry?
I'm kind of like you when what you just said a minute ago. I prefer to have the taxpayer keep the money this year. And, with the reality that things may be different next year, and we'll have that discussion, and maybe we have to make some difficult choices next year. Maybe things won't be the same next year. So,
But let's not have difficult discussions this year. In other words, my goal throughout this budget process is, let's not just approve things because it's a low tax year, so let's let it go, we're still at 1.6%. I would like to make sure that any spending increases that we do approve are actually because we believe those are worthwhile, and not because, oh, we're only at 1.6, so we can put it in. That's really where I'm at, too.
And where I'm at is, if I don't want to have a 3% tax increase next year, I've got to start looking at this year and saying that maybe I need a 1% tax increase this year. Because maybe I can't take that position this year because I can't have a 3% tax increase next year. And these are thoughts that go through my head.
Right. It's a dangerous place. Mr. Becker.
I don't want to say too much. I have Mr. Stone agreeing with me over there, so I have to be careful here. But just the two big ones, I mean, this year really were on the debt side and then on the pension side. And I think on the pension side, we don't have a lot of control there. In fact, we have basically almost none. But on the debt side, we certainly do, and I know that there's a lot of efforts in them, if you look at the refi, to drive the numbers down and to smooth them. And I would just say maybe, I mean, this dates back to 2011 and possibly even within the previous administration, for where we ended up with this, large number in a dip in this particular year. But that would be something, hopefully, that we can look at trying to avoid in the future, because I think that's a controllable, and that's a big swing that we just know it comes down and then goes right back up. So I think keeping that number and that we have control would be probably the first place I would say to start looking. And I don't think we can do much of that in the budget right now, but it's probably the first place I would say hopefully everyone can start to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Anybody else? Seeing none, let me express our appreciation to the Finance Department of the town. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gardner, and Mr. Mayor and your teams for all their hard work and effort. Thank you to the administration, Mr. Tetro, your office, and the department heads for all their hard work and for being our colleagues in this, and for your department heads in coming out in several late evenings. Thank you as well to the Board of Education for their due diligence in going through their budget, as well as the Education Administration for showing up at our meetings, as well as a plethora of your meetings. Each year, the information presented by the town and the Board of Ed gets a little bit better. I would like to think that we get a little bit better at our jobs as well. After we get done with this budget process, we will put together a budget subcommittee once again and go through the postmortem to see what we can do differently, maybe get some voodoo dolls or whatever to control the snow earlier in the budget process, so that we don't have those hellacious first meetings. But with that, thank you, everybody, for your hard work, your effort, and your good cheer during this budget season. We have our budget forum on Saturday morning at 9:30 at Fairfield Ludlow High School, and then we have our vote on the budget next week. Any other final wrap-up comments, Mr. Stone?
Coming to the thing Saturday?
I hope so.
Who's coming? Bringing coffee?
Who's coming? All right. Mary, are you going to be able to come?
I will not be able to be there.
Mr. Brown has the coffee that morning, so. All right, seeing none, thank you, everybody, and do I have a motion? I'll take, Mrs. Cook Lippman will do it tonight, and we'll go over and we'll do Mr. Brown. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're done, everybody. Good night.